What is happening to our church today? I heard this question asked outside last week, outside of this church, and it seems to be the question that every Christian community around America is asking these days. What's happening to our church today? And as we pull up the slides for the sermon, I have a couple stats just to keep this question going. In 2007, a poll was taken, and 78% of people would say that they identified as Christian, and in 2014, 71% of Americans would identify. Less than 20% of Americans regularly attend church today, and 4,000 to 7,000 churches will close their doors every year. So again, I ask, what's happening to our church today? And I'd like to answer that question with another question and ask you all, where's the love? Last week I talked about God's love for us. I talked about how much He loves us. And today I want to talk about what we do with that love. I also talked a little bit about my story, and I want to continue that today. So if you were here last Sunday, you would know that I grew up in a pretty large church just east of Louisville, and really began my relationship with Christ from the moment I was born. My Christian immediate family and my Christian family in the church all came together to nurture me and to lead me in relationship with Christ. Even when I wasn't consciously able to do a lot of that myself. But as I began to be consciously able, I got really excited about church. I loved going to church. I loved getting in my Bible. I loved praying. And though I wandered, as I talked about last week, I continued to seek out every single church opportunity that I could, whether it was church camp or it was Chrysalis or Winter Blitz or some of these I get you might not know because they might be Kentucky things, but I just sought out Christian community in every way that I could. And one of those times at summer camp, I was in high school, and they were doing the presentation, which the staff does at the end of every week. It's the same every single year, and it is a presentation, a skit that they put on of the last days of Christ's mission on earth, and then His crucifixion and resurrection. And I had seen it, 100 times before. I go to camp like 2 to 3 times this summer. But for whatever reason, this time when I was sitting there, something stood out to me about it that it had never before, and it was sacrifice. Not just Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, but the sacrifice His disciples made when they chose to follow Him. They gave up their entire lives and they followed Him. And though there was some doubting, as we saw with Peter, the night Jesus was crucified, they all still continued to follow Him, even though their leader was died and then eventually rose again. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking about my life. And for whatever reason, God seemed to be speaking to my heart, saying, Nathan, I have blessed you with an extraordinarily wonderful life, and I've shown you my love and my joy and my peace through everyone around you, all of your life. But I've done this for a reason. I've shown you this love for a reason. And that reason is for you to go and show that love, that joy, and that peace to everyone you come across. And that is the beginning of my call to ministry and what's led me here to this place today, working with you all, and has been the kind of mantra of what I continue to do day in and day out. I try to show that love, that joy, and that peace. But God has a purpose for all Christians and has called us all in a very similar sense. You see, God, like I said last week, has poured out His love for us, but He has also poured out that love for a reason, like He had blessed my life. And that reason is for you to share that love for others. Jesus put it in the form of a commandment when he said this. He said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." And today, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. So if you have your Bibles, you might want to pull them out. We're going to be going through 1 John 4 throughout. Now, fair warning, I like to kind of commentate on the scripture as I read it, so you might have your finger kind of stuck in the pages there for a little while, but I'll also have some of the verses going on the screens. So we're going to start in 1 John 7. "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God." All right, well, thanks for coming out to worship this Sunday. That's all I needed to say. No, I've got plenty more, unfortunately for your sake, to talk about. But this is really the gist of it. So if you want to doze off or tune out for the rest of the sermon, just take away this right here. Let us love one another, for love comes from God. That is the purpose of the sermon. And now I want to point out the end part of there, for love comes from God. You see, He is the source of our love from others. It all begins with Him loving us, as I talked about last week. And to use an analogy so you can visualize it, because I'm a visual learner. I think of this about through a superhero in a movie that came out a couple years ago, the Fantastic Four, the Silver Surfer. I don't know, this might go totally over some of your all's heads. It might not be your generation. Just bear with me. The Silver Surfer started out as kind of like the villain of the movie. Ultimately, he helps out the Fantastic Four, but he's like this like ultra powerful hero, right? He can manipulate energy and matter. He can like pass through walls and just like shoot out beams of like super awesome energy. But the key moment in the movie is when they figure out that the Silver Surfer isn't really the one with all of this power. The power is coming from his board. And the way they found that out is by like watching some of the film of when they were fighting him. They noticed that whenever he shot energy towards them, like the board would kind of glow, and then all of a sudden this glow would rise up through his body and then out through his hands and then destroy something. But it was the sense of like it would come up through the board and out through him. And that is how I visualize what our love for others should look like. See, God's love is the firm foundation that we stand on, right? It is the firm foundation we stand from, and then we draw that love from it and we let it flow out through us. You see, we do not ourselves contain the capacity for love because once they separated the Silver Surfer from his board, he really couldn't do anything. He was left powerless. But it all starts with God loving us. Another way of picturing this that I like to use is an overflowing cup. I have mentioned this several times before. You've probably heard it, but we are like the cup, and God is pouring out the water into us. And now His love is endless, right? It continues to pour out. So it doesn't make sense that the water would stop when the cup is full. No, it continues to pour so long as we let it into our cup. To the point to where that cup then overflows into everyone around us, because that is the purpose and the image, because we are not meant to just be topped off, but to overflow. Now, continuing in verse 7 of John 4, it goes like this: "Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins." This is how God showed His love for us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. The key word I want to point out there is live, that we might live through him. Now, we're used to hearing that Christ has died for our salvation, for our freedom, for our redemption. But what John is saying here is that Christ has died so that we could live through him. And when we live through him, we take up our cross daily, as the Bible will later say, which the cross is the ultimate display of God's love, right? We would take that up daily and live out his love, because living through him means living in an overwhelming love for everyone around him. When you think about his mission, his ministry around the Sea of Galilee, all he did was continue to love and to pour out sacrifice for all those around him. Now let's read on in 1 John 4, verse 11. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. Now it's interesting what John is kind of, the picture that John's painting here. He seems to be saying almost that if we love one another, then people can actually see God, is almost what he is implying. Now, I'd like to talk about people's reputation as kind of an analogy for this. When you see someone, right, whenever you see someone, you automatically think of their personality, their character, your immediate interactions with them, right? Whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously, your mind reels back, okay, who is this person? What do they live for? What kind of things do they like? What do they do? My reputation in high school earned me the nickname Father Dearen. And that was just because of my commitment to church and not really my want to do the right thing, but not necessarily do the not right things, which I could talk more and more about in a different sermon. But see, Jesus told us as Christians what our reputation should be when people look at us, what they should see. And John seems to implying it that when people look at us, they should think of God. They should see God. And Jesus, in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 15 says, all men will know that you are my disciples because of your love for one another. He says, you should live in such a way that when people see you, not only do they see God, but they know that you are a follower of God simply because of how you love the people around you. That's just really awesome. There's no other way to put it. And it's a very high bar that Jesus is kind of setting for us, that we should live in such a way that immediately people know that you are a follower of him because of how you love. Now, see, this is where I got the title of this sermon from, Raise Your Ebenezer. It is a part of the hymn that we'll sing later, Come Thou Fount, the same hymn we sung last week. But does anyone know what Ebenezer is? Anybody? Rock? Yep. If you break down the etymology of the word Ebenezer, it quite literally means in Hebrew, rock of help. And it comes from 1 Samuel. When Samuel is the judge over Israel, he is kind of reigning over Israel. They're under attack by the Philistines, and they're under siege, and they're turning towards all these idols. And Samuel says, whoa. You guys got to put away your idols if you ever want to end this siege by the Philistines and get the Ark of the Covenant back. And so he gathers all of Israel together, and in an act of worship and sacrifice, they repent of what they were doing and turn to worship God. And during that time, the Philistines are like, ho, they're all distracted. Let's go ahead and attack them right now. And so the Philistines attack the Israelites, and all of a sudden they're panicking, right? They're in this worship, but now, I don't know, these Philistines are attacking us again. And Samuel says, let's just continue to worship the Lord and He will provide. And what happens is, as the Philistines are coming to attack, the scripture in 1 Samuel says that the Lord thundered out in a way that confused the Philistines. And so they were in all sorts of confusion, and immediately the Israelites overtook them and chased them back to wherever they came, slaughtering all of them. And after the battle was over, the Philistines never entered in to attack any Israelite territory again. And 1 Samuel, 7 says that Samuel took a rock and he placed it in between the town where the Israelites were worshiping and where the Philistines came from, and said, and called it Ebenezer. Thus far the Lord has helped us, he says. And this rock acts as almost like a monument, that everyone who passes by it would see it and remember the time that God confused the Philistines to where Israel could just rout them. And they remember that and think, wow, this God of the Israelites is for real, right? He really loves His people. He really fights for His people. See, it is a memorial like the ones that you'll see when you go to locations remembering different places, but it is a memorial of how much God had helped the Israelite people. You see, with our reputations and with how we act in the world, we should be the same way. God should be able to look at us and whenever they see us and the way we love, say, wow, God really loves Joe. And God has really helped Mary. Fill in the blank. God really loves this person. He really loves all of us. And they should be able to see that because you are living your life out as a monument of what God has done in your life. Now we'll continue on in 1 John 4, chapter 4, verse 12, where he says, if we love one another, His love is made complete in us. Now this idea of making love complete in us is not new. John also wrote about it in his gospel in chapter 15 when Jesus was saying the parable about the branches and the vines. He said, remain in me. But he also says, I'm telling you this so that my joy may be with you and that your joy may be made complete. And the reason why John uses this kind of phrasing, this kind of vocabulary, is he's giving the love in us a purpose, right? It is purposizing the love that God has given us to go out and love others. It's almost like a light in the darkness, right? If you think about a light or a candle, if you cover it up, is it really filling out the fullness of what it is? No, see, a light is only really truly a light when it begins to illuminate the things around it. If it just stays within itself and doesn't glow, then it's not really a light. And so the same should be our love. The love that God has poured out for us, the light in our hearts. Should we hide it under a bushel? No. I'm going to let it shine, right? That's the song we sung when we were kids. Now on to 1 John 4:19. 19 through 21. Lost it for a second. I think it's up on the board. Yeah. We love because He first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, does not know God, does not love God. For whom he has seen, whom he has not seen. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on today. I can't quite read that. And He has given us this command: whoever loves God must also love his brother. Oh, geez, that's tough, God. If I don't love my brother, that means I don't love you. For me at least, that hits home. And I really wish I could stand up here and make these verses a little bit easier for all of us, right? Because it really calls me out in a lot of the times when I haven't been loving one another's. You see, because there are going to be times when there are people that are hard to love, right? There are going to be people who wrong you. There are going to be people you just don't get along with. There are going to be people that everyone in the room seems to be talking bad about, and it would be really, really easy to jump in on that. But God says to love them, right? He says, because when he talks about a brother here, he's not talking about your closest sibling brother, because then I would be off the hook because I've got 2 sisters, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. No, he's talking about all sons and daughters of Christ. Young, old, the people we like and the people we don't like. We must love them. Why must we love them? Because God loved us. You know, we are in a bond with God. He has called us into a certain accord of living, and we continue to sin against that. But God continues to love us, right? No matter how far we fall away from Him, He will always love us. In the same way, no matter how much someone does wrong against you, or how much you might want to just really just hate somebody, God tells us that to love them. And so that's my challenge for you today, that you show one person in your life this week. Just close your eyes or think about some person who you don't necessarily want to love, or maybe it would be just even a random stranger, and show them unconditional and overwhelming love that you wouldn't normally show. And the reason why I put in there, you can open your eyes now if you're still thinking about that. Don't want anyone going to sleep at this stage. That you wouldn't normally show, and I put that in there because I would hope that you're showing this kind of unconditional love for your spouse or your kids. But if you're not, it'd probably be a good place to start. And the thing about this challenge is there's really no excuse for it. I know a lot of times my tendency when I hear this, I'm like, okay, well, that's all good and dandy. I'll make sure I read my Bible and, get my heart right with God more, and make sure I memorize some verses before I go love others. Or I might make some type of excuses. But the thing is, there's no training required for loving people. You don't need a master's degree from a seminary. You don't need an ordination from a church to love people. All you need is God's love for you. All you need is to receive His love and let it flow out from you. You see, when you personally love like that, when you let God's love flow out of you into the people around you, you see, it will make the love that is in your heart complete. And when we all, follow that, when we all love everyone around us, then I don't think we would be asking the question, what's happening to our church anymore, right? I think it would be clear to see what's happening in our church, and that it is growing in love and in ministry and in fellowship because we are loving others and because they can see God in us. When I was a kid, did anyone sing the song that goes, "They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love"? Does that sound familiar to anyone? I remember singing that as a kid, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. They'll know I'm a Christian just by our love. But now that I think about it, I think there's very few times I've seen that actually ring true in someone's life. The only times I really know when someone's a Christian is just by, so-and-so goes to such and such church and so does this ministry, but not necessarily the love that they pour out for others. And so this week, let's just flip the switch. Let's let that not be the status quo anymore. Let's really live out that song. Let everyone know that we are Christians by our love. Let's change the numbers of the statistics that you saw on the screen. And all it has to do is it just starts with you loving someone the way God has loved one of you. So love one another. Raise your Ebenezer as a memorial for all the love God has shown you. And as we sing this final hymn, Come Thou Fount, the same song we sang last week, I want you to focus on the words. Right now, I want you to think about all the love that God has shown you and has poured out for you, and let it move in you. Let His love start boiling inside you. Just feel it coming to the brim of your cup, so that when you go from this place, it just starts pouring out from you into the hearts of all the people around you.